All right, welcome to a very special backup or bonus or emergency or something episode of the Retro Game Club podcast. I'm Hugh, and joining me is someone who is tired of answering questions. Rob.
Never. Talking about myself, I would never get sick about that. As a few of our listeners will attest to, I can be a name dropper sometimes, but there's one question in here that asked me to do that, so.
To do that, yeah. I'm the opposite. I will, any of these like icebreaker games you have to play at work where you like talk about yourself or something, I use a different identity, man.
Yeah. Do you tell them like you're a sculptor or something, or like?
Yeah, maybe I'll pick a character from a video game. Like, didn't someone call into that like late night alien conspiracy show and claim to be a scientist, working on a secret government project, and then basically explain the plot of Half-Life to the host?
No, but I mean, I haven't heard that one. Like Coast to Coast AM, you mean?
Yeah, Coast to Coast, that's it. Coast to Coast AM.
that sounds like something that would happen.
I'm only aware of that show because I used to manage a bookstore when I was in college, and I was the night person because I was in college. So I was responsible for closing the store every night. And if you had a lot of cash to count, I mean, it was weird. I mean, I still can't believe that like some store chain trusted me with like $20,000 in cash every day.
Yeah.
Especially, whatever. It's insane when you think about it. And that's $20,000 in 1990s money. So that's like $1 billion today. And you'd be there late counting money or cleaning up or whatever you had to do. And there was just a radio on in the back room. And at some point that cut over to Coast.
Yeah, I thought it was entertaining. After a while, I had to stop. It got around the time of whenever the U.S. Tea Party started to become a popular thing. That's when it started. Politics started getting into that alien and ghost stuff, Bigfoots, and I had to get out.
Yeah, because I grew up in a house where my father was fairly high-ranking military intelligence. I have never believed a single government conspiracy theory because I know for a fact they cannot cover up Jack.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Right. So
maybe it was all an act when he was home, so I wouldn't figure out the secret of
he was flying UFOs during
right. Yeah, yeah. He's been in like 3 car accidents in the past 5 years. I don't know about his UFO flying skills.
Well, what are we doing in this podcast? This is a extra episode, right?
Yes, this is the Ask Us Anything. We had that open for like 4 or 5 months. Got a lot of questions. And that's it. Unlike previous ones, I actually made a point, and you did as well, to write down notes. So if it sometimes sounds like we're reading off a script, it's because I didn't want to, answer something badly. Like if someone asks, like, no one asked what my favorite, like, Atari 2600 game is. But if I did that off the cuff, I would probably say Adventure. But then if I sat and thought about it, I maybe would have come up with something else.
See, I'm even worse, where if, like, I have a retro game podcast and I collect video games, and at night I'll watch YouTube videos about video games and collecting and studying prices and stuff. But if you just walked up to me on the street or something, or at a restaurant, it's like, Rob, just name a video game. I'm like, I don't know. I can't think of any. I'm sorry. I fail. So notes are needed.
Yeah. So like I have on my desk here the mini crossword puzzle. I buy this every year when it's half off.
Mm-hmm.
It's the page a day mini crossword. And sometimes there'll be like a video game clue on there and I'll just blank. It'll be like Legend of Blank, popular video game by Nintendo. And I'll be like, well, I mean, are they talking about English titles or Japanese titles? Because it's the problem, I just overthink it.
Yeah. Well, and we've been collecting these for a long time, like we said, but also, technically, any episode is an Ask Us Anything episode. All you have to do is ask, and we will answer it.
Yes, within reason. It's always Ask Us Anything within reason. This time there were no questions I threw out, so that's good.
Nice. Yeah, no one's asked for our social security number or anything yet.
Yeah, that hasn't come up yet.
All right. Where are we starting here?
I'm sorry. The first one is actually going to be from Zach. Because he has access to the show notes, he was able to post his question first. So he asked, "Are there any games that one or the other of you rejected the idea of covering?"
Uh,
Did you answer that one? I
well,
wrote an answer.
I would say no, other than, we're busy with family and kids. So like a few times you would choose a long JRPG and I would just like, I think like twice I just straight up didn't try. I'm like, there's no way I'm even going to attempt this.
Yeah. Yeah, so I said very much the same. Like, there are definitely games that I've not looked forward to playing, but I'll pretty much watch any speed run. So, worst cases, I'll watch a speed run instead of playing it. And you mentioned JRPGs. There are a few that I have intentionally not included. Like, I wanted to do like Final Fantasy IX or something at one point, and I'm like, oh, you know what? That would take like 2 months for us to get through, so I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. But also, I should say that if any of you have been in a book club or something, there's always a few people that just didn't read it. They're there for the wine, So that's
Yeah.
how I feel like when one of us just can't play the game. It's like it doesn't work out every single time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was thinking like if I did like a long game, it would be like I would do 2 episodes a year, and I'd forget the names of all the other co-hosts in between them.
That might be a funny podcast.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. I know there were we've talked about topics that didn't pan out. It's because we occasionally had topics where like they sounded good on a bumper sticker, but then when you started looking at it, you realized, oh wait, this is not a good topic.
Yeah.
There's those. And then the other thing is like I like to think that if either of us like suggested Custer's Revenge, then the other one would be smart enough to say, no, we're not doing that game.
I think that would be a podcast ender.
Yeah. Yeah. But luckily I'm not gonna. I don't know if we probably we've done M-rated games because I think at a minimum we've done some of the Mortal Kombat games, but like I don't think we've even talked about doing like Leisure Suit Larry.
No. Yeah, there's other Sierra games I would rather do.
Yeah. Next one comes from Caleb R. Maybe we have more than one Caleb. I don't remember. What's the craziest house show you've been to, or bands before they were big, or just a wild time?
I think we opened for Modest Mouse in one of their first tours, and the lead singer Isaac Brock tried to fight me. He was very drunk, and I'd been drinking too. I'm a very passive person, but I was talking
How big is this guy?
He's about my size. He's not huge. He's just very aggressive, but actually he's kind of big now, but in the Frank Black kind of big. But this is 25 years ago. But we were on the same compilation, our bands were, and I mentioned that to him. And then he said the name of some compilation, and he's like, I was like, no, that's not it. And he's like, well, that's the only one I agreed to. It's people like you that are screwing me and not paying me for my music. And he got really red in the face, and like his band members had to like pull him away from me. I'm like, okay, call. I had nothing to do with this. I'm just here. But we played on like Death Cab for Cuties first tour with Jack White's old bands a few times, maybe with the White Stripes. I'm not sure. I'm buddies with the Suicide Machines, so we always had crazy times back with them before Tony Hawk and after Tony Hawk. And they're actually going to be out here in Australia soon, so I'll be with them. But yeah, crazy house shows, maybe small venue shows with like Trail of the Dead, Explosions in the Sky, Tuscadero, Dismemberment Plan. A lot of 90s. If you're into 90s indie rock, you know this stuff. If not, I'm just saying words that you don't know. But then, a lot of crazy times in studios that I won't get into right now. And
You met George Clinton, right? Is that a true story?
a lot of George Clinton stories for sure. Yeah, pretty much any. And he's still playing. He's what, like pushing 90?
I This is the time of year I work on my Deadpool. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. Someone who has smoked a lot of crack in their life and is that age, you may want to throw him in your Deadpool. Very nice guy. But yeah, any of the old Motown acts, I have
He's
crazy stories
83.
about. 83, yeah. How about you? Do you have any old concert stories?
No, I mean, I don't. I never saw any bands before they were big. I do remember in high school people talking about the Smashing Pumpkins before they were signed,
Hmm.
but I never saw them before they were big. You mentioned running basement venues.
Hmm.
I probably saw Local H at a basement venue, but I don't think they qualify as big.
Yeah, our
I don't know if
basement
anyone else.
venue, yeah, was in Ann Arbor, and we had so many bands that should have been in a straight up venue come through there. And of course, we would open for all of them because why not? And, oh, crazy times. Yeah.
Um, I mean, in the '90s, I got into like kind of I went to a lot of like techno concerts in the late '90s.
Hmm.
Those were all kind of crazy, but I wouldn't call those before you were big. I don't know if pro wrestling counts, but I did see CM Punk at a community college gymnasium that had about 20 people in attendance.
Nice.
Me and my two friends I went with, so I do have witnesses, heckled him pretty thoroughly because he had a Pepsi logo tattoo. He has a
That's
big Pepsi tattoo. I know you don't know
strange.
wrestling, but well, whatever. So it was a lot of like, "Hey, you're the choice of a new generation," kind of taunts at him. But
Hmm.
that's we're like people. It's funny. We're like the only three people in the crowd even like making noise. Like it was just again, it's like 20 people. A couple of them were like these like toothless old ladies and stuff. It was a weird crowd. But it's like the wrestlers, I think, actually appreciate if people in the crowd are into it at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's actually his Wikipedia page has a photo from the show I was at, and I'm like, I think I know which toothless lady took that photo because she was like yelling at us to, I don't know, be more nice to the wrestlers. So she had this whole like, like, don't you know he was in Indianapolis last night and blah blah blah. I'm like, I don't care. We're at a wrestling
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
But then like, I totally forgot about him. I didn't even remember his name. And then like a few years later, one of these two friends texted me, Pepsi tattoo guy is on Raw right now. I'm like, what? Flip over, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the guy from the gymnasium that we heckled.
That's so
So
weird.
yeah. You have none of those gymnasium, like the guys that compete in the community college gymnasium, like none of them. They're either guys that are totally washed up or just will never have a career at all. Like
Hmm.
he's the only guy I saw that ever was on a major promotion.
Makes
I
sense.
saw Shark Boy once, but Shark Boy was never like a huge star. But he was at possibly the same show. It was the same. It was the same gymnasium. I don't know if it was the same show or not. My wife like knew quite a few before they were famous people.
Hmm.
She was a theater major at Loyola, and like the creator of Glee was someone she did theater with for a few years there. And then there's an actress. She was on a Disney show. It's a show where like Disney characters are alive in the real world.
Okay.
It might be called Once Upon a Time or something, some variation of those words. And she was the
Yeah.
lead on that show.
Cool.
And it's like I met both these people at college parties for sure, but this was long before they were famous, and I didn't really interact with them too much. I was there. I was at this college party with my then girlfriend. I really wasn't like all that interested in the other people there. Let's see. And no, she not keep in touch with either of them. It's not like she can call them up and you know
Be a
ask for.
good.
I think the guy that created Glee also did that Dahmer show on Netflix. I think it's the same guy.
Okay. I've never seen either of those shows. I know
Okay,
about both of them.
I haven't watched either of them either. My wife watched the Disney one because I think she knew that woman better of the two.
Hmm.
So Adam writes in with some questions for Rob. So I will just sit here silently. Are you going to continue making episodes of the podcast?
Oh yeah. So I hope. So the plan is now. First of all, I'm getting Hugh to record as many episodes as possible, so he doesn't retire for the next year, even though he's not. recording. But I have a few guest hosts lined up who are in the video game world. And but as a full-time co-host, I would only keep it going regularly if it was someone like Hugh. You have something going for you where you, well, had an old retro video game podcast, which in this day and age everyone does, but you had one of the first, so that's interesting. But also you make Genesis games, so that's interesting. You're putting yourself out there, and
Yeah.
So I'm kind of looking for someone that's a little bit different than me. So I was, I'm white, born in the Midwest, late middle age nerd, and I don't program video games. So like, get rid of one of those things. Like, is there a podcast host in Japan where we could get like that end of the world, kind of through his eyes growing up in the 80s or 90s, that kind of thing. Maybe the UK, I don't know. So we'll see. I feel like it's hunting a unicorn, but it'd be big shoes to fill. So if that doesn't happen, maybe the show will go to monthly or whenever we have a good topic idea until it either fizzles out or comes back with, this unicorn of a co-host. So that's a long way of saying I intend to, but we shall see.
Yeah, I would refer people, but I don't talk to practically anyone anymore. So, Okay, next question. Oh, so what do you like most about retro video games, and what keeps you interested in them?
I really like how they are hardware constrained, so they had to, not focus on the graphics and just make a fun game that plays well. That's why Super Mario Brothers exploded. It was, you could debate it's the first game that like played almost flawlessly, and its graphics were good enough. But then also being really creative within those graphics and making them look amazing. And you could take something simple and make it complex, or vice versa. And I kind of feel like you know what you're getting with those. I just went through and played a bunch of modern games, and I'm back into playing retro mostly right now just because I really got burnt out on them. You keep spending money on these games and they suck. And I mean, I guess you had that back in the day. I mean, you definitely did, but
Yes. Yeah,
but now
there's a
we know
whole
which
YouTube
ones are good
channel
and
out there.
bad, so it's kind of easier. But that
I
one
say I
was
did.
just for me, but Hugh, I think you could answer that one too.
What about retro games that keeps you most interested in them? There's actually sort of a variation of this question later, I think. So I'm gonna save it for then. I think two people asked
Okay.
someone else asked this in a similar way.
And then he goes on to ask if there is any video game designer program that I could meet, who would it be and why? I mean, it's Miyamoto. It's 1,000% Miyamoto. He was the architect of my childhood. I already met Burger Becky. She created my my first favorite game, Task Times in Tone Town, but then she also, is an amazing programmer of other great games like Rock and Roll Racing and stuff like that. And some crazy ports too. And it'd be kind of cool to meet Ken and Roberta Williams just because I love Sierra Online games, but I feel like lately they've been interviewed so much that I don't know what I would get from meeting them. That might be a don't meet your don't meet your favorite people kind of thing.
Yeah, that's unfortunately like my thought on this question in general. Like I would be, like I don't know. What if I met Shigeru Miyamoto and he told me I looked goofy? You know what I mean? Like,
He
he's
ends
not
up being a
wrong,
total
but
racist
would
or
still
something.
be-
Yeah.
Yeah, it would still be. It would be very difficult to deal with. So that's why I don't really know that I would want to meet anyone. Unless it was. I don't know. It would be someone very niche.
Well, again from Adam, questions for Hugh. I said I mixed. I said you and Hugh at the same time.
People do that all the time. So.
What's your favorite RPG franchise and why?
All right. So this is a little tough because I mean, my two favorites are the Final Fantasy and the Legend of Heroes Trails series. It's hard right now because I really did not like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So, like, my opinion on this is super biased. I have to kind of like block that game from my memory to talk about it. Talk about Final Fantasy. Like, I think the Trail series has definitely the best battle system. You know, they use the same battle system in each game, but I don't know how to describe it. Like Legend of Heroes 3, they redesigned the battle system so it's like a overworld, you know, kind of grid-based system, and then every game since then has just iterated on that a little more. So it's just a continuously evolving battle system. Whereas Final Fantasy, it's a mixed bag. You know, Final Fantasy 6 and like 7 Rebirth, no similarities at all. And 15 took like a whole new approach. So, you know, they changed the system a lot in Final Fantasy. The downside to the Trails series is that it's all like one massive storyline. And the longer the story goes, sometimes the more absurd it gets. You know, both are kind of equal in the soundtrack department. And, you know, Final Fantasy games are like much higher tech. You know, that like Final Fantasy 16 is one of the best looking games I've ever played. I'm sure there's better, you know, but I don't typically buy games just because they look good. Whereas like the most recent Trails game probably could run on the Vita or maybe even PlayStation 2. It's just not nearly as advanced.
Wait, did you play Final Fantasy 16?
I did, yeah, at the beginning of the year.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. What was your one sentence
Like
review on it?
I mean, overall, I liked it. I overall thought it was very good. I was expecting an open world game like 15, so I was a little bit disappointed initially that it was very linear. But like Final Fantasy X is extremely linear and it's very good too.
I heard the second half of 16 is just boring. Like you just want to be done with it. Did you feel that way?
No, I didn't. There are
Okay.
some boss fights towards the end of the game. Like, if you ever play Final Fantasy 16 and you're about to do a boss fight, pause and save it for the next night.
Yes.
Because they are all like an hour long minimum. So
And then you have 90 minutes of cutscenes afterwards.
you have like 90 minutes of cutscenes afterwards. So whereas like the last Trails game, the last boss fight was, I don't know, 10 minutes at most. And that was for a boss with like 3 forms. It's just a really different approach they take. So like the way I put my notes here is like the if you take the best 3 games in each series, like the top 3 Final Fantasy games are better than the top 3 Trails games. Like that's, you know, Final Fantasy like 6, 10, and maybe Crisis Core, like those 3 are better than the best 3 Trails games, I guess.
Okay.
But it's really hard to choose between the two, you know, because again, you have one where the series is constantly trying to max out the hardware it's running on and trying to reinvent the battle system every time, and sometimes the battle system reinvention works really well, other times it doesn't. So sometimes you get a game like 15, which is like the open world part of it is done extremely well, but the story is kind of not so good. Versus Trails, which is like where there's a starting point going all the way back to like, you know, 1998 or something. Engine wise, the main story started. It was a PSP game, so almost 20 years ago. So, you know, the Trail series is like we have a starting point and we're just going to kind of keep iterating on that game engine in story and battle system rather than trying to, you know, create a brand new game every time. So I don't have a favorite between those two. It's just kind of what I could make an argument for either, and it just sort of depends what you want to experience.
Next is what's your favorite Zelda game and why?
Yeah, and I think I wrote down Breath of the Wild just because of the open world thing. I don't know that I've played a game that does open world as well as Breath of the Wild. Vice City is maybe the other thing I could think of. Like, Tears of the Kingdom might technically do it better because you have like vehicle building and the underground and the sky and all that, but it's ultimately the same map. Like that's like I like Tears of the Kingdom, but it was kind of a little disappointing that it's the exact same map.
It didn't wow
It,
you like the first time you played Breath of the Wild.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, I mean the underground. I know you like the underground in Tears of the Kingdom a lot. The
I
layout
mean,
is
parts
just
of it.
yeah. The layout though is just the overworld, but reverse, right? Like inverted.
Yeah.
So it's not really a new area. I mean, it's new, but it's not new. So that's related. Is that Breath of the Wild, just how much you could explore from the beginning. Like I didn't realize the Great Plateau was only like part of the game. I'm like, until you get to the edge of it and realize there's this giant map all around it. So
Remember after that came out, everyone said like, "Oh man, every open world game is going to take cues from this one, and you're going to be able to climb everything and do everything." And nope, did not happen. It's more difficult than people think.
well, going back to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the game I will complain about some more. That came out 7 years after Breath of the Wild. The open world part in that game is bad, flat out bad. 15 did open world better than 7 Rebirth.
Yeah.
Not even close. What is your favorite Zelda game? I know this was addressed to me, but you
Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild, and then a very close second is Tears of the Kingdom, and then probably Ocarina of Time after that. For all the
I
same
go
reasons.
Majora's Mask next. Yeah, but I mean, I realize Majora's Mask, I can make the same statement where it's just, remixed Ocarina of Time, but the story of that game and like the whole mask system and the different power-ups and abilities you get from the mask, I really like. That was my favorite Zelda game until Breath of the Wild.
I am going to replay that soon. I have it on 3DS, but I don't like games where I'm timed. That's where it gets a knock for me.
Yeah. 3DS kind of fixes that one a little bit, though.
And what are your favorite podcasting memories?
For the show, I would say that somehow on this podcast about retro gaming, we interviewed a guy from NWA and Adventures in Babysitting. The latter of whom I suspect was high, but I'm not accusing him of that.
Well, so let's talk about that for a minute, because that was so the way I know Keith Coogan is that when I forget if it was MySpace or the beginning of Facebook, one of my best friends, Marie, knew him somehow and would always send. She ran a Harmony House, which is a record store, and would always send him like her favorite local bands. And one of his that he wrote back and said he liked was Hot Paws, one of my old bands. And so I was like, oh, I'll be friends with him online. And we are. And he posted like during the pandemic, I think that, he built like his wife built like a 1-Up arcade.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, would you come on and talk about that? It'll just be fun to talk about that and other things. And yeah, he talked about, first seeing a Pong in a 747 flying to Hawaii and stuff like that. But he said that, yeah, I'll do it as long as his wife's name is Pinky. If Pinky could be part of it, I'm like, sure, whatever, I don't care. So I didn't know if he actually had video game knowledge. So I really kept it light and to be respectful, asked, Pinky a lot of questions too. But she just, she didn't participate that much. Everyone's different on camera. I'm not faulting anyone. But my point to all this is if you listen to that interview, the last 2 minutes, he drops about 10 kind of obscure Sega CD references. Well, not references, but knowledge that he has where you could tell he was a gamer at the time. So if I were to do that all over again, I would absolutely just be peppering him like about, like just talk about actual video games, not just like do the weird, we don't know how much you know about video games interview that we did,
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't really know what to expect going into that. So, interesting, but no, really, like for all the times I've been doing podcasting, it's really cool whenever I meet someone at Midwest Gaming Classic that knows me. or knows of me, right? I think that's cool. I don't think I've ever had a single bad experience with a listener at one of these events. Like, no one's ever come up and been like, you know, I can't stand you because you don't like Earthbound or whatever.
You aren't canceled at Midwest Gaming Classic.
Yeah, it's always a good time when I run into people, so that's fun.
You know, if you remember the Arabian Prince interview, the guy from NWA, he said that he was going, after the interview, he was going to Sony's HQ in LA to talk about something video game related.
Yeah.
And we asked him if he could get us any hints, and he said no. And he said, my only hint is it's really big. And I said, like PS5 big? And he said, because PS5 hadn't come out yet. And he said bigger. And we haven't heard anything since. So every once in a while, I'll still look him up to see if he was involved in any cool product.
Yeah, I thought the thing I remember most about his interview, the thing that stuck with me the most, was that his first NWA paycheck went straight to the computer store.
Yeah, and that he brought his Amiga on the Straight Outta Compton tour. And while there were like riots in Detroit after their show, he was in the back of the van writing a video game on the Amiga.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. The whole sort of going to the computer store and just give me one of each. One of each model.
Yeah. I feel like that was the interview that we got before and possibly better than the only one that we got like before and better than the Retro Hour.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah, I don't think,
because they focus on interviews. That's another thing.
they do. Yeah, they get some really interesting hosts. I mean, some of them, I don't know if there's ones that have been duds, but there are some that are maybe not super interesting. But they've had some really good guests on there.
Oh yeah, surprisingly good. Yeah.
But I also, I think this is going to sound weird, but I think for like, especially American, or even because they've had like Japanese developers on there too with the translator. I think a British show is less threatening. I think
I could see what you mean. Yeah. Before I forget, a lot of these questions for this episode came from Discord. So please, if you have any interest at all, please get in our Discord. Even now, I actually had to close my Discord window because it kept beeping at me. It's pretty lively right now. So look in the show notes and go to the link tree and get in on it. It's pretty fun. Good stuff.
So then here's questions for both. I'll still from Adam. What is your favorite aspect of retro video games compared to modern video games?
What? I forget my answer to this. I'm reading my notes. Oh yeah. So with modern gaming, I like playing games right when they come out. You know, Hugh, a few weeks ago, you mentioned that you don't normally pre-order games. The reason why I do sometimes is so I have them on day one and I know it's going to be here, and that I could dive in on it and be part of the conversation while it's happening, just like I was when all these retro games were new. I want that to keep happening, part of culture as it's unfolding. Mm-hmm. With retro, it's already old. It already happened, so there's no rush. How about you?
My favorite thing about retro games compared to modern games is that they are less hassle. Like if I want to start a new game, it's like a multi-day commitment, right? You have to install the game. You probably have to update the OS. You probably have to update the game, then update the OS again. Then you have the tutorial stage, and then finally you're playing the game. Oh, another update. Right.
Oh, my favorite is PlayStation 4 and 5. If you have it in rest mode, and you have the game open so you could hop back in the next day.
Yeah.
It'll just install an update and reboot your system without asking you.
Yep. I've experienced that with the PlayStation 5. So I have a workaround for that. Do you want to know my PlayStation 5 workaround?
What is your workaround?
Well, so first of all, I have a PlayStation Portal. My wife bought me one because there's a lot of nights she wants to watch something on the couch. We're on the couch and there's something she wants to watch that maybe I'm not into. So she wisely decided that PlayStation Portal was the way to solve this problem. Mm-hmm. And it has indeed worked. But the PlayStation Portal and my PlayStation 5 just will not talk to each other. Numerous updates. Anything that you've seen posted on any forum or Reddit about how to make these systems talk to each other better, none of them worked, except for I put a Wi-Fi hotspot on my phone, and if they both connect to the same Wi-Fi hotspot, they work flawlessly.
Interesting.
So to prevent my PS5 from updating at night, I click turn off hotspot.
That's funny. Mine works pretty well, but I have the PlayStation plugged in, so it's just the portal. But if I go in the next room from the hotspot, then it gets a little pixely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but both of them talk to the hotspot on my phone. Everything's fine. Ultimately, it's funny because my phone the hotspot isn't using data. It's relaying to my Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So the same Wi-Fi network they can't talk to each other over works great if it's being proxied through my phone.
It's funny.
Never have to deal with that with the NES. See what I'm talking about here?
And then also the PS4 and PS5, if you turn it off at all, when it comes back on, it'll tell you just how big of a garbage human being you are for not turning it off properly, even though you tried to turn it off properly.
Yeah. Yep. Or what if you have a power outage? I got so annoyed by this. There was a lot of construction in my neighborhood 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. They were redoing streets, so we were losing water and power at least once a week because of construction. I actually hooked up a battery, a USB backup, to my PlayStation 4 at the time, just to get it to stop calling me a garbage human being every day.
I mean, it's harsh. It is not nice.
Yeah.
That message.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. What are your top 10 favorite video games lists of all time? And
all right,
you go first, but I just want to preface this with, you wrote yours first, and there was some overlap, and I tried as much as possible. I tried to keep the overlap away. So
we can have overlap. That's fine. So I have this. I'll do it in reverse order. I kind of ranked mine. I get the ranking could change. So from 10 down, I have Doom, then Bust a Move. That's the serious one. The Trails in the Sky plus Trails in the Sky second chapter. They're two games. They're all one giant story, so I just lumped them together. Mm-hmm. Tetris, Ys 8, Final Fantasy 6, Chrono Trigger, and then number 3, Wii Sports, Vice City, and Breath of the Wild. I think that's ranked. I think that's the order I would put them in.
The ones that would have overlapped that I didn't list are Bust a Move and Vice City.
Okay.
So mine are, in no particular order, Devil's Crush, Legendary Wings, Super Mario Bros. 2 USA, Ys Book 1 and 2, Ys 8, Bonk's Adventure, Breath of the Wild, the King's Quest series, I couldn't pick just one, Nier Automata, and the Uncharted series. I couldn't pick just one.
Yeah, Uncharted is my number 11 here. I really, really enjoyed that. I played I've not played the Vita one yet, but the 5 that are on PlayStation 4, I've played.
You really need to play Watch Dogs. It feels like, I mean, it's not like artifacts and stuff like Uncharted, but the gameplay is really like Vice City, Uncharted, that kind of gameplay. I think you'd really like it.
Yeah, it's strange. Uncharted, the gameplay wasn't even that great, I thought. I mean, it's a lot of really unrealistic kind of monkey mechanics, for lack of a better term. It's the setting and story that I liked. It's like getting to see the first Indiana Jones film for the first time. Mm-hmm. Is what they all felt like to me. But you're in control, and it's a longer, they're 20 hours instead of whatever Indiana Jones was, 2 hours.
Yeah. What do you think AI will do to the future of computer programming over the next 5 to 15 years?
What do I think?
Yes.
I predict massive consumer backlash and will mostly be relegated to creating memes and scamming senior citizens.
I put, pretty much the same. It'll help developers get a jump start on projects, help debugging. It'll do both at an intern level at best, That's 5 years, but who knows for 15 years?
I was watching a demo that I put this in the notes the other day of a, a tool, an AI tool to help make Java development easier. Okay.
Hmm.
And they're like, look, it can generate Java doc comments. I'm like, we had Java doc comment generators in 1998.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not AI.
Like, this is that. There's nothing. You don't need like hundreds of thousands of dollars of computer hardware to auto generate Java doc comments.
But will
We,
those
we
comments be on the blockchain?
we figured
That's
that on a
the
penny,
question.
man. I, I could write a Sega Genesis demo that generated Java doc comments.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not even joking.
Yeah. What era of video games do you think has aged the best and why?
All right, you're first on the show list.
Okay. Well, at first I love this question. It's mostly subjective, but probably 16-bit. 16-bit would include 3 to 6 computers. There were enough colors, etc., to give the games the extra polish, but they were still mostly constrained by the hardware, so you still had to be creative to make your game fun. How about you?
Yeah, I think in terms of aging the best, I just wrote Dreamcast, not like the era, but the Dreamcast specifically.
Yeah.
This system is 25 years old now, so I think the arcade games all hold up really well. Like Crazy Taxi doesn't need any upgrades. If we got Crazy Taxi on Switch, you would change nothing and it would be fine. Sonic Adventure on Dreamcast is more fun than all the games made after it. All the 3D ones. I know the 2D Sonic games are apparently pretty good. 2K sports games. They are definitely more fun than the current EA Monopoly sports games. I was at a job where we had to do a lot of like late night deployments, and I had a Dreamcast I left in the office hooked up to a VGA projector there.
Yeah.
And this was up until about 2012. That's why I said I'm not working these crazy hours anymore, or find someone else to do it. We had people there who were, gamers in that they owned like a Xbox 360 and they played Madden, right? Like they were just the people who bought Madden and Call of Duty and that's all they played. They all liked 2K football way better than the latest Madden game. This, at that point, 12-year-old 2K football game. Shenmue, I wrote in the notes here, like the controls are very bad compared to modern games. I'm not going to dispute that. But the open world is done very well, right? Like GTA 3 also had kind of janky controls. But if Shenmue controlled like GTA 3, it would actually be better. I don't know if that's a hot take or not. But like I think Shenmue did the open world experience better than anybody for a long time.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of notes about the Dreamcast. The retro game collections are really good. So there are like, this was maybe the first system where you could get emulated collections that were like perfect. And you could write Nestor DC for it. This Office Dreamcast that I had a Nestor DC disc as well. So that's just where you have a Nintendo emulator and however many games you can fit on a Dreamcast CD.
That's what got me into retro gaming.
Okay.
Yeah, it brought me back.
And then again, like Dreamcast, good RPG selection. Not huge, but like it's got Grandia 2 and Skies of Arcadia. Those are both pass for modern RPGs if you release them today. Yeah, I feel like game hardware probably could have stopped at the Dreamcast and everything would be fine.
Proof to that is that if you go into a Dave & Buster's or any arcade that's like that, they all still have Dreamcast graphics.
Yeah.
They all just realize this is good enough. Like all the cruising games, stuff like that.
And then sort of second to that, I think like everything from the PlayStation 2, I think a lot of stuff from the PlayStation 2 era holds up pretty well today. Like, I know I've mentioned Vice City already 3 times today. Vice City on PlayStation 2 is way better than the remake of Vice City that's out there today.
Yeah.
All right, next question. If you could choose any video game character to be president of the United States, who would you choose and why?
I would choose the person controlling the cameras and traps in Night Trap. It would be the greatest redemption story of all time, or Sub-Zero for the exact same reason.
Okay. I wrote the I block from Tetris. Because when things are going really badly, the I block shows up and saves the day every time.
I like that answer. Yeah.
Like you can't get a Tetris without it. Also, it can't talk.
It's just there to help.
It's just there to help. It just shows up and helps. That's it. So I block for president.
And then Adam's
thoroughly
last
believe it.
question, and I want to say, Adam, thank you for writing all these. I enjoy every time you write in. What is your favorite video game memory from your childhood? Oh, man. Yeah, I'll just keep reading here because I have so many, so I'm going to list them all. Playing Contra with my friends on summer break or sleepovers. Huge. That's just a huge one.
Okay.
Being dropped off at the mall, which had a KB Toys, a Babbage's, 2 arcades, one of which was a 2-story arcade. Toys R Us, a Sears, a Suncoast. Is that what they were called?
Yeah.
And
Suncoast.
all those 80s and 90s stores like that. We would just spend all day in the air conditioning, browsing video games, electronics, eating in the food court, wandering around, staring at people like you that would be working like mall clerks. And you probably had people like us there all the time. Riding my bike way too far to a Blockbuster to rent video games for the weekend. Having friends witness me accidentally become perfect at Tiger Heli, and I could play forever if I wanted to. Beating Super Mario Bros. 2 USA for the first time and being blown away by Mario's sleeping animation. Just like, how is that possible? The first time I stayed awake all night was playing Civilization 1. I think I stayed awake for like 30 hours. And one time, I know I've told this story before, my dad drove me to Toys R Us so I could buy Ninja Spirit. And it was a really warm August day. On the way home, the skies became really dark really quickly. I could tell he was driving home really fast. We get home and the news is like, hey, everyone, maybe you should take shelter. And I don't know if alarms were going off or anything, but it was straight line winds of 70 miles an hour, tons of lightning, but I didn't care. I was in the dark in my bedroom playing this game that had it was like the perfect ambience for that game. I feel like that game is kind of stormy and dark. And that whole day is just kind of tattooed to my brain. How about you? That was kind of a lot of
Yeah. I actually going to shorten the answer I wrote because I realized there's like another question where I think I repeat myself. But when I was a kid, like you said, go to the mall on the weekends. I lived in kind of a small town. There wasn't a mall where I lived. There was a downtown area, but there wasn't a mall, and I'm going to talk about that in a later question. But like my father didn't live with us full time. He was off doing army stuff most of the time, and we would get just ditched at the arcade at the mall.
Mm-hmm. Good problem
which
to
I
have.
get it. My mom, yeah, well, she needed a break. She had to go do mom stuff at the mall, which was probably sitting somewhere quiet.
Yes.
I guess. I don't know. But so I didn't have any money, but it was still fun to like see new games because it seemed like at that point, in the '80s, there was just something new every single week.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I was most amazed by was Dragon's Lair. Seeing that for the first time, it's hard to describe like how just awe-inspiring that game was the first time you saw it. And Discs of Tron, a game I can never pronounce, but that was also just mind-blowing to see that cabinet for the first time. And related to that, on these mall trips, so this would be like 83, this would be like 1983, 84. So leaving the mall with huge piles, just bags full of Intellivision games for almost nothing because it was when the industry collapsed. Like, as a kid, I didn't realize that this is really bad, that you can get Intellivision games for like a nickel. But as a kid, it's just great. Like, hey, I have like 5 new games today.
Yeah, I remember when my mom worked at KB and our Atari games were $5. I just thought video games costed $5. I didn't realize that it's because they crashed and they were trying to get rid of them.
Yes.
Adam does write more. I know that he said that was his last one, but he wrote a part 2. So here's Adam part 2. What's your favorite movie and TV series of all time?
Okay. I've written about this on my website, but like the movie Clerks was like a big influence for me going back to college. Like I get some of the humor, maybe doesn't hold up well today, but this was 1995, so who cares? Um, I don't really like any other Kevin Smith films though.
No, I agree with everything you just said. Yeah.
And then Real Genius, I probably put as number two. I think I wanted to live that life, but was never quite smart enough. Um, and I don't know if I have a favorite TV show, but like Seinfeld and X Files are kind of two. I would call them comfort food shows. I've watched Seinfeld probably more than any other show
Hmm.
because it's on every night when I go to answer emails or dork around on my computer. So
Hmm.
yeah. What
Well,
about you?
Real Genius, I own that one. I watch that all the time. But yeah, that's a weird one. A lot of people don't know that movie, but we both put it. But probably the OG Star Wars, like before Special Edition, or Sneakers. You know the movie Sneakers?
Yeah, yeah. I know Sneakers. Yeah,
I do really like the movie Hackers. I know it's cheesy, but I just think it's funny.
yeah. I have that on my PSP.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
It's a perfect movie to watch on a PSP. And for TV show, probably Star Trek: The Next Generation. But I've also rewatched that show Superstore over and over.
Okay.
It's just like a silly office type show, but you would probably like it because it's just clerks, you know.
Yeah.
I know it's a stupid show, but for some reason it's just my palate cleanser. You know, if I've had a long day or I can't think of anything to watch, I'll probably put on Star Trek Next Gen or Superstore.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never gotten into Star Trek. I have nothing against Star Trek. It just seems like too big of an investment to get into if you never watched any Star Trek before.
Agreed. Yeah, I could see that.
Uh, do you like retro remakes, remasters as much or more than the originals?
Well, I put it really depends. PS2 and PS3 remasters on the PS4 are so convenient, but NES remasters on the Switch are cool. You know, that's fine. The problem is sometimes those older remasters are still really laggy, so I end up just playing the original anyway. What else? Oh yeah, and then also when you have like the jump error, like in Mario Lost Worlds in Mario All Stars, it's just so disappointing. So I guess my point is there. If it's convenient and they've done it well, and that seems to be the PS2 and PS3 ports to PS4, then it's fine. But really, the older ones, it's kind of rough.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I followed on your notes there that it does totally depend. Like remakes are usually better if you're just getting it working on modern system with bug fixes and some enhancements,
Hmm.
maybe adjustable difficulty, that kind of stuff. Always worse. If they always are worse if it's a total remake with modern gaming annoyances like DLC and a bunch of pointless filler side quests and mini games.
Yep, yep. What games do you think need a remaster or remake the most? And I put the Space Quest series.
Okay. I put Fantasy Star 1 through 4 in some modern engine, but without all the filler from the Final Fantasy 7 remakes.
That would be great.
That would be good. And then the original Ultima games too, because they are very, very hard to get into. I've tried to get into
Yeah.
Ultima a few times. It's very high barrier to entry. They're clearly designed for like old PC game. They're old PC games. They're just not super friendly to start up with. Although they are, I think, good engines, good story. I was sort of like Cosmic Fantasy 2 or the very first Legend of Heroes games. If you just did them like the Final Fantasy pixel remasters were done, they would be great.
Nice. What's your favorite console that you've ever owned?
At this point, I pretty much has to be the Switch, mostly because it just has everything I want to play.
Hmm.
I was very skeptical of the Nintendo DS when it first launched, but at this point, I could maybe argue for that too. It's usually the system I bring on trips.
Hmm.
And how about you?
No surprise, the Turbo Duo. But a close second is the NES. You know, it's too hard to list every, or sorry, it's hard not to list every game console I've owned because I love them all so much. But
Yeah.
I'll keep it to those two.
What magazine would you subscribe to that has been canceled if it was still available today?
EGM because they had more TurboGrafx 16 than the rest, or GamePro because it was a better magazine.
I'm gonna go with Die Hard Game Fan because I just like the style of the magazine and all the coverage of Japan and Japanese gaming. But if Nintendo Power existed, I would probably be a subscriber to that, even though Nintendo Power has tricked me into buying many bad games over the years.
Yeah.
Which wrestling video game is your favorite to go back and play?
There is, I haven't done this in so long, but there is a Nintendo 64 wrestling game that's 4-player, and it doesn't stop everyone from choosing the same wrestler. So a bunch of us would all just choose the Hulkster and have a ton of laughs because we were trying to figure out who was who.
Ah, okay.
Because you're all playing at the same time, you know?
Probably could be WCW Mayhem. I'm gonna have to look into that. I own all of them. I go WrestleMania the arcade game because there's no time commitment to play it. Like you just fire it up, you play it, and then you turn it off.
Is that the one that has the one big button? I mean, it has more than one button, but there is a big one you hit too. And you could be Doink the Clown.
You can be Doink the Clown in WrestleMania the arcade game. Yes. Yeah. Well, that's something if in your house, which is the same engine, but just simple, fun game. If you could put together a dream team of creators to make the perfect RPG, who would you choose and why?
I mean, no surprise, Shigeru Miyamoto is producer director, Falcom musicians for the music, and Yoko Taro from the Nier series is the writer.
Yeah. I this is another it depends question because I feel like these people would probably all just fight with each other. I feel like it's like if you went back to like the 80s and you're like, I can create a super group with like Eddie Van Halen and Axl Rose in the same band, right? Like they would not produce an album.
Yeah. It'd be Chinese
Lars
Democracy
Ulrich
or
on
whatever,
drums. Well,
whatever the Guns N' Roses album was. Yeah.
Right. It would be let's get Eddie Van Halen, Axl Rose, the Metallica drummer. Let's put them in a room until they produce an album. So I would actually rather reassemble a team that did a really good game. Like I would just say, let's reassemble the Final Fantasy VI team and let them go wild on a new RPG in that style.
Well, what is your favorite controller and why?
I like the NES Advantage. I find most game controllers to be too small. So I always like the NES Advantage a lot. And I like the GameCube Wavebird because it's also huge.
That is a big controller, yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Not a surprise, the TurboGrafx and PC Engine controller, because its turbo switches were great and it just felt like the perfect Nintendo controller. And then the PS5 DualSense is really high up there. I really like it, even though I've had two fail me.
Yeah, I thought mine was broken when I was playing Final Fantasy 16 because I didn't realize it had like a resistance feature on the analog sticks. No, on the analog triggers.
The triggers, yeah.
Because at one point I'm like trying to it's like press R2 or R1, whatever the trigger is. I don't know the difference between R1 and R2. Press one of them to open this door. And like I'm like pressing it really hard and it's like not working. I'm like, wait, what's going on? And then I finally had to Google. I thought like my controller broke. And it's like, no dummy, there's resistance built in. Like, oh, huh.
Yeah, that's the
Well,
new
I wish
haptics.
they didn't do that. Like, how do I turn that off?
Yeah.
What is the best platformer ever made?
I'm going to go with, and this is not a joke, I'm going to go with Blaster Master. Does that have enough platforming? I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if not, Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario 64, and Astrobot.
Yes.
Astrobot is incredible. If you have not played that game, play it.
Yeah, I wrote it has to be Super Mario Brothers 3. Although again, like it's just gonna be a weird one. Chippendale Rescue Rangers is maybe number 2 for me.
I watched that get speedrun a lot.
Yeah, it's really short, and super easy.
Yeah, that's a
Like,
Capcom game, right?
yeah. I mean, you just plug it in, play through it in like 30 minutes. That's it. That's the game. Good times. Like, it's just a nice, simple, easy platformer. Do you think VR is a fad or here to stay?
I think once they get elements of AR in there and the headset is a lot lighter, I think it could be here to stay. I think right now it's a fad because there's no reason for it, but I think it's still too early for it. How about you?
Yeah, I think we'll always be around for gaming and maybe like healthcare or therapeutic uses, but I don't know that I see it as something everybody has in their home. I was
Yeah.
actually reading a bit about like therapeutic uses for it. Like if you have a fear of heights, you can use VR to try and get over it or
Yeah,
whatever.
absolutely. Spiders, get one that's just filled with spiders.
Yeah, you could do that. Majors writes in with just one question. He says, "What are some other podcast favorites that you would recommend?" I wrote a bunch. Some of these are a little slightly political. They're not. I don't listen to like. I don't listen to political podcasts. Some of these things touch on political topics from time to time.
So you're not recommending like InfoWars?
Not well. I will recommend it if the Onion completes their purchase.
Yes, yes.
I mean, like it's funny because with me going off not podcasting anymore, like my favorite podcast was the Old School Wrestling podcast, and that just ended last year. And that one was the host basically running out of stuff they wanted to talk about is how it came. Like we've talked about the matches we want to talk about. I kind of was feeling that way with retro games too. Like there are not a lot of them I want to talk about anymore. Atari 2600 Game by Game podcast, of course, is very entertaining. It's very informative for sure. I would describe it as semi-active right now. So Ferg does an episode kind of when he has time to do one. I think he was trying to do it like bi-weekly or monthly before. And now it's like 2-3 episodes a year, maybe. So I was going to rattle off ones. I actually went onto my Spotify feed to look at podcasts that I still subscribe to. Decoder Ring, which is like weird pop culture things. I listen to The Distraction, which is a bunch of former Deadspin guys, mostly talking about sports. History of the 90s is kind of an interesting one. The host is Canadian, and sometimes the topics are about stories in Canada you've never heard of, but were big deals there. Hit Parade is a Billboard chart history podcast. I don't know why I like that one. I just find this stuff interesting. Inside Trader Joe's. I like that one a lot because it doesn't have ads. Purple Stuff Podcast. So this is a guy that he's run a blog since I think the 90s. And it's just general nostalgia podcasts, often talking about horror movies, or horror movie topics, I should say, comes up a lot. Retro Hour, which again I usually just listen to for the interviews. I almost skip directly to the interview segment.
Same.
I can't do retro gaming news anymore. Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. This is it's a weekly podcast. They are extremely consistent in its news items, interviews with scientists, and then stuff about like pseudoscience. Like why you didn't see Bigfoot would be on there. It's the opposite of Coast to Coast with George Nuri. There's a very niche one called Seen Through a Glass, which is only about microbreweries in central Pennsylvania. That is a real thing. I was listening to that to plan a road trip for the future.
Nice.
And then I listened to Slow Burn in 1 year. So those take some... Those are the most political ones to listen to, but they really aren't. I mean, they kind of are analyzing an old... some bit of news from the past and kind of breaking down from a different perspective, from the modern perspective, like how those events happened. So those are my regular ones. And then sometimes I'll just be like, oh, look, a 8-episode podcast about Heaven's Gate. I'm going to listen to that.
Nice.
My wife is a little worried at how much Heaven's Gate stuff I listen to. I'm not, I mean, the leader does bring up a few good points, but I'm not joining their cult.
But you're not buying the family Nikes?
No, no, no. But did you have any recommendations? I know I just shot off a whole bunch of stuff that are not retro gaming related.
One of the guest hosts for next year is going to be Glenn Rubenstein, which is in my favorite podcast, Game Boys to Men.
Okay.
He was the vid kid who he had a weekly column while he was 14 reviewing Nintendo games, and like Nintendo and Sega would send him stuff for I forget which paper. But then because of all that, Nintendo is the word deposed him for in the legal battle against the Game Genie. So he was a key witness on whether it ruined gaming or not. And it was because of his testimony that Game Genie won against Nintendo. And he's just been in video gaming pop culture for a long time. So Game Boy, and they just talk about it's him and Jeff Gerstmann, and both of them have just been in gaming forever, on the journalism side mostly. So their stories from back in the day are fascinating. So definitely Game Boys to Men. That one is on Patreon. You do have to pay for that one. And a podcast called The Life of the Album. And it's a guy, he only does a quick intro and then you never hear his voice again. And he interviews famous people from the 90s and early 2000s about their most popular albums. So like the Pixies talk about Surfer Rosa, and I'm forgetting all the other albums, but just a bunch of really cool stuff in there. So definitely like that one. Let's see. Eric writes in, stranded on a desert island, you have to pick a 16-bit console and 5 games. What do you pick?
Okay. So I wrote, I go Super Nintendo. I take Bust a Move because I don't think I'll get bored of it. Final Fantasy 3 or 6, although I will get sick of that eventually. Link to the Past, which I will probably also get sick of eventually. Super Mario All-Stars, which I guess is cheating because there's 4 games on there, 3 of them that you actually want to play. And then last, new in-box copy of Earthbound, which I will use to barter when a ship passes by.
Nice. Well, I keep saying not Bust a Move just to be different than you, because that's up there for me.
Yeah.
In fact, that was my first Neo Geo cart I ever bought.
Okay.
Devil's Crush, Bonk's Adventure, Microsoft Solitaire, East Book 1 and 2, and Ninja Spirit. Not a surprising list on my end. What is your least favorite Nintendo system? You cannot pick the Virtual Boy, and why do you dislike it?
Okay, so I put the only one that I've never owned, Game Boy Color, because it is not a very big upgrade over the original Game Boy. There's a first party Zelda game on it, but it's already on the original Game Boy. So it's just the same game, but with some upgrades. And then the second party Zelda games are okay, but they're not in the top half of Zelda games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I put this as a difficult question, but that Game Boy Color was a great choice. And is that the first half-step game system? Like, is that the first Pro? Is that a Game Boy Pro? What do you think?
yeah, I don't. Maybe the Intellivision Model 2 counts as that. I can't remember if there are any actual upgrades in the Intellivision 2 though. It could be. I mean, it's because like the Atari 5200 was a different system.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the
Yeah, I have to
7800
look
was
back.
different.
There's going to be something that I'm not thinking of from the past. Anytime you think something's the first to do something, it almost never is.
Yeah, but I think in gaming, the spirit of my question isn't, is it the first? It feels like it's the first. It's the biggest that
Yeah.
people actually noticed.
Yeah, it may not technically be the first. I understand.
And then talk about going to the arcades as a kid, teen, young adult, more. Did you line up to play Street Fighter?
No, I would never line up to play a game.
Yeah, and I kind of already talked about going to the arcade a lot. I definitely, my favorite was when I talked about the mall earlier, I was talking about Lakeside Mall, which if you were a kid in the 90s and your class, your teacher made you watch this anti-smoking video where kids are hanging out in a mall and smoking,
Hmm.
that was Lakeside Mall in Detroit. And that was like
Nice.
that was like a national, I don't know, paid for by the government kind of video. But closer to me was Meadowbrook Mall, and they had an Aladdin's Castle, and that was just a magical place that I would ride my bike to. There was a candy store there too, and so we'd get a bunch of candy and play a bunch of video games, and be standing in clouds of smoke.
Yes.
And I would always go
So,
to Star Wars 1983 first.
all right. Yeah. So when I was a kid, I lived in a small town in Pennsylvania, and we had um, two arcades in the downtown. This would be like 82 to 84, somewhere in that time frame. And again, these were just like little downtown buildings that someone hastily converted to arcades to capitalize on the fad. There was one of them I was not allowed to go into because it had a spittoon in front. That's a true story. My
I
mom said
I
you
wouldn't
can't
go there
go.
because it's too gross.
Yeah, my mom said you cannot go to the arcade that has the spittoon. But the real place I went to in the small downtown was the roller rink,
Oh,
because the
good
roller rink,
point.
of course, is a more kid-friendly environment. I couldn't roller skate. I still can't roller skate, but it had a big arcade section. So like I remember seeing Miss Pac-Man in track and field there for the first time. Um, and then of course the mall that I referenced in the other question. Like basically an arcade game made between 82 and 83 was there at some point.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you remember seeing arcade games at the gas station or grocery store?
Uh, yes, not so much the gas station, but definitely grocery store. We had a Kroger by us that had a game or two, but the roller rink I think is a good one, kind of adjacent to this, where I specifically remember a Goonies 2 and a Castlevania machine there. And for some reason, they always sold big pickles. Did your roller rink sell big pickles at their little convenience or their little restaurant thing, or no?
I don't recall.
I was just like, who would eat that giant pickle? And I think I bought one just to see why someone would do it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they do it anymore, but the company I work for now, when I first started there was a big culture around ordering Jimmy John's every day. It was just a thing everybody did.
I do love Jimmy John's.
Yeah, I like Jimmy John's because they have a sandwich that's no mayo by default,
Yes,
so
I'm into that.
they can't mess that up. But I remember they used to have like really advanced like pickle options, because I remember people like obsessing over like, well, no, I want to cut four ways or something. I'm like,
That's right, quartered or halved. Yeah.
yeah, they would do. You could do like third or something. So I remember that being a big deal. I don't really like pickles that much though. Um, so for me, like the very first video game I ever saw was Donkey Kong in a grocery store. That's literally the first time I ever saw a video game, was Donkey Kong at a
Mm.
grocery store. Super Pac-Man, I remember being at a local pizza place, and then many years later, I was staying at a really terrible hotel, and it was in the basement next to the swimming pool. I remember we took a road trip once. We were probably driving to see our family in Minnesota, but I don't remember exactly. And we stopped at like the sketchiest gas station I've ever been in, because it had a huge convenience store, right? So I think we were stopping to get snacks. We just stopped at the place that had the big convenience store,
Hmm.
and there was a Wizard of War cabinet just like in the aisle, like just in the middle of nowhere. Which somehow you know the sound of Wizard of War. You can picture that in your head, I assume.
No, I can't.
Oh well, listen to it sometime because it just made this place extra creepy.
Okay.
There was a roadside oasis in Chicago that for a while was a hotspot for Mortal Kombat. A guy tried to hustle me there once. That's also a true story.
Hustle you for what? Pizza?
Like I played a Mortal Kombat. And he's like, "Oh man, let's play for money now." Because
Okay.
like, but little did he know I was holding back too. So, um, So, and then of course, Mortal Kombat's were in every 7-Eleven in my area for a while. And today, so I know the question was about like retro times, but if you ever, I go up to like middle of nowhere, Wisconsin for vacation all the time. And so many like little places have an arcade cabinet in the front, like restaurants or, supper clubs, which is really just a restaurant that call with a fancier name. They all have like so many of them, not all, but so many of them will have just a random arcade game in the front lobby. Like I've seen Simpsons Arcade in two different small towns in Wisconsin.
There's a record store in Chicago that if you buy a record, you could go. They have a big back filled with pinball machines. So if you buy a record, you can just go back and play some pinball.
Yeah, I've heard of that place. I'm drawing a blank on the name.
But you did remind me of something when I forget if it was like eighth or ninth grade. It would have been right before the original Street Fighter 2. So what is that, World Warriors?
Yeah.
Right before that came out, my dad traveled a lot around that time, and he'd always put it on his own card and expense work, so he would get the miles.
Yeah.
And he was so proud. We got enough miles where he took us to Maui for free, right? All on miles, the flight, the hotel, and everything. It was a Marriott, and this Marriott had a back room, like a small arcade. Actually, it was kind of a good size arcade, and no one was there. Like he took us during the school year. We took like a whole week off school, like a September or something, and this would have been like a month before that game was released. I looked back and I saw the Street Fighter 2 there. They must have been testing it. Like maybe there was a test place for it, a beta.
Okay.
And which Hawaii could make sense, And I just remember I couldn't believe how great it looked. And the combos you could do, and one of the guys that worked there would like showed me how to do a fireball and stuff like that. So that really affected my gaming, and it was cool to see something that early. Not living in Chicago, I never saw prototypes and stuff. And I didn't realize it at the time. It was decades later where I realized that happened. But what's the first time you upgraded a PC or broke something and beyond fixing it?
Yeah, I think this is a better question for you. It's been my first upgrades were pretty simple. Like add a CD-ROM drive to my first Pentium.
Well, I upgraded DOS on our 386 Magnavox computer, and the CD-ROM stopped working. And my dad was kind of like, "You broke it, you bought it," kind of thing. And so I credit this to why I am an IT professional today. Is I picked up the manual and I started reading. And, I got to the page that said like, oh, the config.sys, mscdex.sys or whatever it was to make the CD working. Put this line in there if you have a CD drive. And I did it and I rebooted and it worked. And I was like, wait, all you have to do is read? This is easy stuff.
Yeah, little did you know.
Yeah, and then after that, I saved up for over a year when I was a junior and senior in high school. And from a computer shopper, Motherboard Express, I want to say is the name of the company.
Yeah,
a company that's still around.
Like a company.
Yeah, it's a company that's still around. I bought all the parts from them, other than maybe some Comp USA parts locally, and built a 46DX2, which later became an overdrive, Pentium Overdrive 83, I think it was. But yeah, built that one from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really built a ton. My current computer I did build, but it's a brand called Shuttle PC, so it's mostly pre-made.
Yeah.
You basically just pop in a hard drive and a CPU, and some RAM. You don't have to do most of the work.
I do want to go back and answer one more podcast question, because one that I got into around the same time I think I started listening to your previous podcast, The Retroist. Do you ever listen to that, or did you ever?
No, I've heard of it, but I've never listened to it.
I really like that one. That guy has great stories that are really like an analog of my childhood. and he has a great voice for it, and his memory is amazing, and the way he tells the stories about video games and 80s kid stuff is great. So The Retroist, if you haven't listened to that one.
So we're gonna move on. Thank you, Eric. We're gonna move on to No Swear Gamer.
Who is a podcast as well, right?
He does, yeah. He's done a lot of stuff. He's got a YouTube channel. Nice guy all around. I
Yeah.
recommend any things he has ever worked on. Here's a question: what do you think are the 3 biggest retro gaming related stories to have happened since you started the podcast? We both have the first. We have one definite duplicate answer, man, and it's hard for this not to be the biggest one.
Yeah, Atari buying Intellivision. I mean, who would have thought that? But for me, the SNES emulators that could be up-resed and into HD. I think it was BSNES HD. That just blew my mind. I thought that was a huge story. And yeah, and when we first started this, there was so much RetroArch news. That was just so big. But I don't know if those were the biggest. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
So mine are more like I have one news item and then 2 trends.
Okay.
So obviously Atari buying Intellivision and just the whole general transformation of the Atari Holdings company from being like a company running crypto scams to someone doing really, really great things with their catalog.
Yep.
Like total turnaround. I wrote the demise of the dedicated mini console. So our first year, we talked about the PlayStation Classic, which tanked. And the TurboGrafx 16 Mini launched during our first year, and I'm going to go on a limb and say it also tanked, although I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, it was impressive, but it didn't sell well, I don't think.
Yeah, and Sega and Nintendo have both left this market. They are not doing this anymore. So I think that's a big news thing. And the other one would be NES Maker games. Specifically that NES Maker games, there's a ton of them. People are porting them to Switch. So like Doodle World and Space Raft, they're small games, but they're worth, the whatever the price is for them, $4.99.
Absolutely,
I think is
yeah.
full price.
They're legit,
100%
yeah.
worth $4.99. So I think as a trend, like seeing NES Maker, the whole explosion of NES Maker games is just a huge thing, I think.
Yeah, good answer. Yeah. What are your favorite wrestlers from the 80s?
Yeah. So I said this is kind of tough because a lot of these guys turn out to be really garbage human beings later in life.
Yeah, let's just put that aside. Like we're talking about 80s, you only have the knowledge you did in the 80s.
Oh. Yeah, I still can't do that. I can't erase. So I picked a couple of people that are mostly not problematic. Like if I'm going to go back to watch wrestling today, these are the ones I'm going to watch. Randy Savage. Again, not a perfect human being, but could be a lot worse. So he had a reputation for like meticulously planning all of his matches, and it definitely shows because like the only bad match he ever had would have been against like the Ultimate Warrior. Terry Funk, because he could wrestle like any style of match and was in a lot of big like memorable feuds. This is the very, very end of the 80s, but the Steiner brothers. So before Scott Steiner discovered steroids, he looked like he could be the greatest wrestler of all time. And their early matches are some of the best ever. And in general, like late 80s WCW tag teams. That whole era, you had the Steiner brothers, Midnight Express, Road Warriors, Doom, Freebirds, Skyscrapers, Varsity Club, and the very badly named Dynamic Dudes. All just a lot. I just watched an old Halloween Havoc. It was a pay-per-view from that era that had some of these teams, and they were all great. I mean, the tag team scene, if you watch old pro wrestling, that like late 80s, early 90s WCW tag team scene was just great.
So you obviously know a million times more than I do. And I just want to preference my answer, with I don't know any of these people. They could be Klansmen that like sell cracked puppies. I have no idea.
One of them is, yeah.
Okay. The Junkyard Dog I always rooted for when I was really young. Roddy Piper. He seemed like a nice guy. Again, don't tell me if he was the Klansman. Randy Savage, because he was just, bigger than life and kind of crazy. And maybe he kind of seemed like a crackhead a little bit. Zeus, I thought he was terrifying, and he was a perfect villain after Andre the Giant retired. And my favorite tag team was the Killer Bees at the time, just because I thought it was a cool name.
Right. So if you ever watch the series Dark Side of the Ring, one of the Killer Bees is a pretty frequent commentator on there, especially in the last season.
Really? Okay. What do I watch that on?
That is on Hulu.
Okay, they don't have that here.
The wrestler B. Brian Blair from the Killer Bees is on quite a few episodes because that season featured the most recent season featured a couple of wrestlers that I guess he was close to.
What was the show called?
Dark Side of the Ring.
Okay.
And it's, as the name implies, it's the sketchiest stories about pro wrestling you will ever hear. And yeah, he's on, trying to remember which ones now, because it was ones where he was like friends with the, guys that he was friends with. So he picks stuff from the era where you remember him wrestling. You will, and then some of those are just hilarious. I mean, like there's this episode on there called the Plane Ride from Hell, which after you listen to it, you will strongly dislike a number of wrestlers from that era. But it is a wild, wild episode.
I'll have to check that out. Again, I'm not a person that likes watching wrestling now. I loved it as a kid, but I don't watch basketball now, but I'll watch Bulls and Pistons documentaries and stuff. So I think I would like that.
We're getting near the end, so let's bring this up. Did you watch the documentary about the brawl, the Pistons Pacers brawl that's on Netflix?
No, but I was there.
Okay. Oh, you were there?
Yeah.
Were you like getting punched in the face by Chris Webber or whatever?
No, I was in the nosebleed.
Okay. Was Chris Webber involved in that?
I can't remember. I can't. The Pistons were so bad at that. Yeah, that's right before they got. No, they just won. They won before that. Because they won in 2004. I think this was like 2005 or 2006, right?
Yeah. Watch the documentary, though. It is really good. Okay. I think we got down to about 2 people. JW. Something you thought was a great idea and still enjoy, but then you didn't follow through, or even remotely, if there's something you enjoy listening to or watching that's meant to be interactive. Like, he works just kind of weird, but basically what he's getting at too is, I'd like to know if one of you enjoys watching old exercise tapes while sitting on the couch and thinking, man, aerobics sure looks fun.
I mean,
things that we thought would be a good idea. There's 2 questions in here, and I read it badly, and I apologize, JW. Something that you thought was a great idea, but you didn't follow through on, or something that's meant to be interactive that you watch but don't do the interactive part.
I would say pretty much anything that has to do with a Raspberry Pi. I'll start up. I own like 7 Raspberry Pis, different iterations, and I think I've done one thing with one of them. And the rest just kind of sit there.
Yeah.
I did not play my arcade games a lot when I had a bunch of cabinets. Tron and Star Wars got a lot of play, but I would often just turn them all on and feel the ambience of them. I'm trying to think if there's anything interactive like on TV or anything that I like, but there are a bunch of I actively don't like speed running. Like I like to just enjoy a game. Just like I said earlier, I don't like being timed, like games that time me, but I like watching speed runs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How about you?
All right, so for the unfinished projects that I would enjoy, I have 3 things. Building or buying a Mister. Building a media server for my home. I literally have a Chrome tab that has been open for a year about this. And then I like the show Doctor Who, but I have never seen an episode that after 2013 or before 1974.
Okay. I've never seen an episode at all.
Yeah, it's like Star Trek. It's a big time commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So and there are so many times where I'm like, that's it. I'm going to go catch up on, the seasons after 2013, and then I just watch a Seinfeld rerun instead.
Nice.
And then for the second question, I watch a lot of DIY repair videos for things at home. And, I watch it. I'm like, all right, I'm going to fix this thing. And I watch the video and get to where you're supposed to start doing stuff. And I'm like, yeah, no, that looks like a lot of work. Like just the other, I have a storm door that is in bad shape. I got to replace my storm door. So I open up YouTube and there's a video called How to Replace a Storm Door with No Power Tools. And in the first 3 seconds, that dude is on a circular saw. And I'm like, most deceptive title ever. So I watched a bunch of other videos on how to replace a storm door. And I'm like, yeah, I think I can do this. And then I chicken out at the last minute.
Nice. Yeah. I really like that question. For the record, JW, I did not come to this scroll down in our sheet in a long time. So your answers are the only ones I'm doing off the cuff. So I'm either take that for what I'm either sorry or I'm giving you better answers. You get to pick.
Okay. Well, it's going to be the same for the next one. Our last emailer, or maybe it was Discorder, or maybe they sent it in via Pony
Here, wait.
Express.
Well, let me read it to you first so I can have time to think.
Okay.
So, Pixel Generation writes in, right?
Generation Pixel.
Sorry, Generation Pixel. This is why Hugh reads the longer emails, because I might be dyslexic. Biggest retro gaming regret? What's yours?
Not buying more stuff on clearance in like 1995 to 96 when I was at the tail end of working in the game store. So I didn't own a 3DO, but I was in the store when all those games got marked down to $10. I should have just stockpiled a library. And same for 32X, Jaguar. I did buy a lot of TurboGrafx 16 games on clearance, but not all of them.
Mine is the same, but I never worked in a store for clearance. But really, I feel like it was around 2001 where the games really hit the bottom before people started wanting them again. So at that time, not just hoarding them on eBay or estate sales. Because, I mean, even at that time, I think on eBay, I got a mint with case Mac Color for $5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think it was like $15 for shipping. And now that thing would, I mean, those are really expensive now. Yeah, Mac Classic Color, sorry. Or Color Classic, yeah. And I also, in order to be able to afford a PlayStation when it first came out, not when it first came out, this would have been probably 96. Yeah, mid 96. I sold my Turbo Duo with all the games, and if you think about the most expensive games, there you go, for about $220, like just enough to get a PlayStation with some games.
Yeah, that's a bad one.
That's a bad one. What are your holy grails?
I don't know if he was asking about that I own or that I would like to own.
Either.
I still own some very rare store signage that I have up in my game room here. I sent you and Zach a picture of my Super Metroid cardboard sign once. That was from when Super Metroid was new. I have that on my little Metroid display section here. I have some Sega CD displays that are incredibly rare. I mean, like stuff that literally has never been on eBay. And it's cardboard, so it's not going to last forever, I guess. Maybe I should get rid of it while I can. I don't even know what I would price it at, because again, this is stuff that just never shows up. Like I have, one of the things I have, you probably owned the Screensaver After Dark at some point, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
With the flying toasters?
Yeah.
So I have, in the back here, an inflatable flying toaster hanging from my ceiling. That was one of our promo items.
Okay, that's cool.
It is cool, and I don't know what I could ever sell that for. Have you ever seen an inflatable After Dark toaster from like 1992 on eBay before?
No, I have not.
You probably never will, unless I sell that one behind me. So stuff like that, stuff that stores throughout that I'm like, oh, I really like that thing, so I kept it and put it up somewhere. But in terms of what I want to own, I would really like to own a GameCube kiosk with a complete set of kiosk discs.
That's awesome.
That would be my dream thing to own. I know I can do it. I can get a modded Wii and a lot of downloads from archive.org. I can build the same thing. I don't want a complete game collection. I want the complete demo, like the stuff you saw at Toys R Us demo collection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I did own two of my Holy Grails, which was a Tron cab and a Star Wars cab. I had to sell them to move here. So I wish I had those back. Not that I have space for them. In the future, I wish to have those back. In terms of what I would like to finish my 32X collection. So any games I'm missing. Same with my US TurboGrafx collection. I'd like to fill in anything I'm missing. And I think that's really it. I think this is going to sound stupid, but I am being dead serious. I think my ultimate Holy Grail is an Intellivision Amico. Just because it is something that maybe, are there 5 of them? Are there 25 of them? Because I don't think there's going to be any more than that ever. And it's something that has a few games that you could actually play on. And I think is a really interesting part of gaming history. I'm being dead serious on that.
Yeah. Well, what you needed, unfortunately, the only way to get one is to start a YouTube channel with like 5 subscribers where you do nothing but talk about how brilliant Tommy Tallarico is.
Yep. That's what you had to do, for sure. That's not a joke. That's what you had to do.
But now you know next time there's a system like that, how to get a free one.
Yes. And I'll start the next question.
Okay.
Where did we first meet up, and do we have any fun stories of us two together? And no. So, like many, you had a podcast before this for many years. When that ended, I had an idea, which if you listen to maybe the first 20 episodes of this podcast, we kept it like that, where we really focused on the game club, and then there would be a topic each episode that had something to do with programming or a project. And he responded and said, "That sounds interesting. Let's give it a shot." And here we are. We just didn't have time to keep those projects going. And,
yeah, it's a big time commitment.
But those were cool. Those were really cool. I especially liked, when we got into compilers and stuff like that. But we only met up once when I was visiting some family in northern Chicago, where we met up at some brewery.
Yeah, it was a place called Only Child, because it was one I went to a lot, but it unfortunately did not survive the pandemic. The owner did open up he instead opened one in like a trendy part in downtown Milwaukee. So It's not like is bankrupt. He just decided just go to a place where the people go to drink beer,
Well, and this wasn't during the pandemic that we met up, but we were there was only one other person in the whole place.
Yeah. As I recall, there was a storm or something outside. So
that's right. Yeah, I did end up Ubering that night. We had a lot of beer. Yeah. Did you have anything to add to that question at all?
No. I got to find a new microbrewery to go to though.
He asked if I'm in a band, and right now I am not. I actually just got I'm looking at it right now, a lot of my music equipment out of storage here. A lot of my friends are in bands here, and literally every time so I would like to write some songs with some friends here, maybe put out, an album or something like that, like a compilation type album. But we shall see, because every time I go to pick up the guitar or set up some music stuff, I just end up playing video games.
Yeah.
And Hugh, what's your programming history?
Yeah, I don't know. No. When I was a kid, my parents sort of disagreed on what activities I should do. My father really wanted me to play Little League, which I was not good at. And one summer instead, my mom sent me to a computer camp, which was basically teaching logo programming on the Apple II.
Yeah.
And so that clicked, right? So that actually really clicked for me. And we ended up getting an Apple II, and I taught myself basic programming out of magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And high school, I still did basic programming, kind of as a hobby. But back then, if you admitted that you liked doing computer programming, you were going to get beat up. So I didn't, I have to keep that in the closet, unfortunately. But then eventually, I went to college after some amount of time. And there I did C. Most of the classes there were C and C++. Well, actually, they're almost all C++. There was one x86 assembler class. I like that one a lot. Clearly, I still like assembler as a hobby. That one really did well for me. And then I got my first programming job before I was done with college. That was doing Visual Basic 6. Well, it was Visual Basic 5 when I started. And Visual C++, which I didn't really know either that well. I'd done some Visual Basic demos for fun, but at that time period, late 90s, man, you just showed up and you got a job. Like,
Yep.
they were so desperate for programmers. I joke with my kids that, like, I showed up and they pointed at a computer and they said, "What is that?" And that was the process of becoming a programmer in the 90s. But that was pretty good. And then for various just career reasons, I changed languages every few years because I don't really care. I guess I don't want to be a specialist in anything. So I did Java development for a long time. Did C# development for a while. I was actually pretty good with C#, although I haven't really touched it in quite a while. The app I support now is Python, but I don't actually write any Python code ever. No, I literally don't write Python code ever. I write a lot of SQL. I write an absurd number because no one ever wants to do that. So
That's the stuff I like doing. I like the very back end stuff.
Yeah, I end up doing again, programming is not like the main part of my job at this point, but I pitch in to do SQL a lot. And then for hobbies, I do a lot of stuff in Java just because it's easy. I know a lot of people think the language is kind of antiquated, but it's super simple to work with. And I do some assembler stuff for fun. But I think the key to staying like employed and somewhat successful in software is being able to change often. I worked at a company that was trying to get off mainframe and was just laying off COBOL developers left and right. And these were people that just were, a lot of them, unfortunately, it wasn't an age thing. They just were like, I don't want to learn something new. And those are the ones that are going to go because stuff changes.
And that's the thing.
Changes and
programming is just syntax. It's all the same. So if you just spent one night or 5 nights looking at the new syntax of this new language you need to and write, a hello world plus a few other things in there. If you are a real programmer, you got it. You're good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I think there's a chance I might try and learn Rust once I'm done podcasting. Like take the time that I put into podcasting and try and write some Rust demos because it sounds interesting to me. I don't know if I'm going to follow through on that one or not. I've looked at Rust a couple times and it seems interesting, but maybe I would dislike it when I started working on it.
Yeah.
I also might try and do like Raspberry Pi, like assembler up for a Raspberry Pi, like highly optimized Raspberry Pi code, like just to see if I can do that.
That's a great idea, actually, because, you could treat it as like an embedded system. That's cool.
Yeah, I was looking at their new, they just announced a new $7 model.
Yeah, the Pico 2,
thinking, like,
right?
Yeah, I was like, that would be kind of fun to see if I could write. I don't know what I would do yet, but most programs that I come up with just start with like you said, hello world. It's like, okay, well, I got the thing to turn on. Now what do I want to do?
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know. Maybe I can read can I read the USB port? Okay, great. All right, now I want to plug into the USB. I mean, like, just sort of, a lot of things sort of evolve that way.
Yeah, I know that question is for you, but I'll answer it quickly.
Yeah.
I really started with QBasic, and it came with a few apps, and a few programs in Microsoft DOS, and I took a basic class and then a Pascal class in high school, and kind of kept, at that time I was into bulletin boards, and a lot of those were written in Pascal, Turbo Pascal. I want to say 3, but I'm probably wrong to be exact. And so a lot of times the source code would get out there and I would edit it a little bit and recompile it. And and kind of learn that way. And then I think I said this story last time, but yeah, then my cousin's boyfriend needed someone to do Visual Basic 3 programming, so I did that in high school for a little bit, and then from there, I actually really got into PHP. I know a lot of people
Okay.
hate PHP. I don't mind it. A lot of people that hate it for reasons that were totally acceptable before PHP 5.5. 5.6, 7, and 8 really, and many times it's as fast and sometimes faster than Python. I'm not saying you should code PHP. I'm just saying like it's hated more than it should be. And
Yeah.
I also think WordPress is a big part of that. WordPress is so convoluted and stupid. It's just not good programming that
Yeah. So that's probably the reason for my reaction.
WordPress.
Because I've had to write, I don't, won't put it on my resume, but I've had to write WordPress plugins and
Yeah, I've done
custom
many.
WordPress code before.
It's horrible.
And, you know, that was just a nightmare. And again, it could, that maybe it was that WordPress was the problem.
Yeah, WordPress is a problem. I've actually committed some code to a few PHP popular web frameworks, and I actually had an idea to kind of troll PHP haters to recompile Chrome or even easier to deal with the code base browser, and instead of having it interpret JavaScript, have it interpret PHP. So it's a PHP stack instead of a JavaScript stack.
PHP script, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that would be funny. And but now I mostly Go, SQL, and sometimes Python.
Yeah.
Anything where I don't have to do front end. I hate JavaScript
Yeah.
so much. It's horrible.
I've never liked, I've only on Visual Basic have I liked front end work.
Yeah, where you could drag and drop pretty much.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's super easy to work with. It's just, it's Visual Basic up till version 6 is just super easy to work with.
I'd like to learn
Yeah.
Swift. It looks like a nice language
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's intriguing too, for sure.
because that's Linux compatible.
Yeah. I've also thought sometimes about just going back to doing C again because it's portable.
I wrote that Romper app. I wrote, if you look on my GitHub, that's C. Well, actually, that's C++. Yeah,
Yeah.
not C.
Well, if you ever want to contribute to a Linux project, you can't do C++.
True. Yeah, but you could possibly do Rust now, maybe.
Possibly, yeah. But like if you wanted to write a driver for something and submit
Yeah.
it to like, for Linux, it's got to be C.
What you kind of already answered the job part, right?
Yeah, I mean my LinkedIn is public, so it's not like I have a public profile on LinkedIn. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yeah.
So I mean I guess people could go look up what I do for a living. I work for a pretty large software company. It's all because like 11 years ago I got tired of working for big companies. I went back to go work for what was then a startup IT company, meaning like pre-IPO, no HR department kind of,
Yeah.
for better or
yeah.
worse, no HR department kind of company. And it was a lot of fun. And then we got bought by a much bigger company because, we made a bunch of money,
Yeah.
I guess. And honestly, it's actually been fine there. I was afraid going back to a big company, I would be miserable again, but there's a big difference between working at a big company and working at like a big technology company if you're a programmer. Like if you're a programmer, you just work at a big corporation, you're probably not really focused on technical issues most of the time. And my job title amounts to like, senior cloud architect, and I mostly work on like cloud architecture and cloud security topics. Security is a big focus. Both not so much like infrastructure security, code security, but then also, preventing users from getting hacked or doing something stupid. The app I work on deals with, it's a financial system partially, and it's just it's a big mess if we have security problems. I'll just leave it at that. So, a lot of like cloud architecture, cloud security stuff. I don't do a lot of hands-on coding, except again when it's like some kind of back end problem, and I can just go in and optimize a query and move on. Debug that particular query and go on to something else.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm working for a Sydney-based IT company that contracts me out for special projects. So I've been really focused on Google backend stuff, BigQuery, stuff like that. Been doing a lot of Python lately. And I also run my own business where I also do Google backend stuff. And yeah, I enjoy it. I hope to keep doing it. I mean, I hope to retire and just play video games.
Yeah, I'm starting to get serious about thinking about that myself, really. But it's I get one more kid has to get through college, and then I will be giving retirement a real serious thought.
Yeah, my youngest is 6, so I have a while to go.
Yes, yeah. Mine is almost in college. My youngest is almost in college. My oldest is almost out of college. So.
Well, I would like to thank Zach for curating this list and, of course, everything he does. And thank you, everyone, for asking all these questions. I have enjoyed answering them. And I love when you guys write in. And again, every episode is a Ask Us Anything episode. So please, if you feel like it, keep it coming. And that's email@retrogameclub.net. And anything else you'd like to add, Hugh?
No, just thanks for listening, and thank you to everyone who sent questions.